I am the host of the museum's public program, First Person. Thank you for joining us today. We are in our 16th year of the First Person program, and our first person today is Mrs. Agi Geva, whom we shall meet shortly. This 2015 season of First Person is made possible through the generosity of the Lewis Franklin Smith Foundation with additional funding from the Helena Rubinstein Foundation. We are grateful for their sponsorship. First Person is a series of weekly conversations with survivors of the Holocaust who share with us their firsthand accounts of their experience during the Holocaust. Each of our First Person guests serve as volunteers here at this museum. Our program will continue through mid-August. The museum's website at www.ushmm.org provides information about each of our upcoming First Person guests. Today's First Person program will be live streamed on the museum's website. This means hundreds of people will be accessing the program via a link from the museum's website and watching with us today from across the country and around the world. A recording of this program will be made available on the museum's website. This is our second time doing this, the first being in March. Anyone interested in keeping in touch with the museum and its programs can complete the Stay Connected card that you'll find in your program today, or speak with a museum representative at the back of the theater when we close today's program. In doing so, you will receive an electronic copy of Agi Geva's biography so that you can remember and share her testimony after you leave here today. Agi will share with us her first-person account of her experience during the Holocaust and as a survivor for about 45 minutes. If time allows towards the end of the program, we'll have an opportunity for you to ask Agi a few questions. The life stories of Holocaust survivors transcend the decades. What you are about to hear from Agi is one individual's account of the Holocaust. We have prepared a brief slide presentation to help with her introduction. Agi was born Agnes Laszlo on June 2nd, 1930 in Budapest, Hungary. This map of Europe highlights Hungary. The arrow on this map of Hungary points to Budapest. Agi was one of two daughters of Rosalia and Zoltan Laszlo. Here we see Agi and her sister, Shosha. They spent the first 6 years of their lives in a small farming village where their father managed a large farm. And here we see Agi's parents, Rosalia and Zoltan. Due to her father's failing health and anti-Semitic legislation prohibiting Jews from working in the agricultural business, the family moved to Miskolc, where Agi's mother managed a boarding house. This photo is of the house that was Agi's home, and the arrow on this map of Hungary points to Miskolc. On March 19, 1944, the same day that German forces occupied Hungary, Agi's father died. Agi, her sister, and mother joined a group of 30 Jews sent to work in the fields outside of the town. After a month, they returned to Miskolc, where they lived in the ghetto for a few weeks before being confined to a brick factory on the outskirts of town. The following month, the family was deported to Auschwitz. This map depicts the deportations of Jews from Hungarian ghettos to Auschwitz. Later, Agi, her mother, and sister were interned at the Plaszow concentration camp. The arrow of this on this map of major Nazi camps shows the location of Plaszow. When the Soviet army approached Plaszow in the fall, the entire camp, including the 3 women, were sent back to Auschwitz for a few weeks, then were moved to several other labor camps. On April 28, 1945, Agi was liberated by American soldiers. This photo of Agi is from 1950 after she emigrated to Israel. Agi resides in the Washington, D.C. area. She moved to the United States 13 years ago after living in Israel since 1949, where she worked in the insurance field for 32 years. She has 2 children, a daughter Dorit, who lives here, and a son Johnny, who lives in Israel. And I'm pleased to let you know that they are both here with Agi today. And if you don't mind, just raise your hand so people know you're down here. Welcome. Agi has 4 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren. Agi speaks 4 languages fluently: Hebrew, Hungarian, German, and English. In addition to our First Person program, Agi participates in the museum's Conversations with Survivors program on Fridays in the Wexner Learning Center. She also speaks frequently about her experience during the Holocaust at schools and universities such as George Mason University in Virginia, Southern Methodist University, the University of Utah, and Flagler University in Florida, as well as at other such places as the U.S. Army's Redstone Arsenal and the U.S. Department of Justice. Augie is also a contributor to the museum's publication, Echoes of Memory, which features writings by survivors who participate in the museum's writing class for survivors. After today's program, Augie will be available to sign copies of Echoes of Memory, which is also available in the museum's bookstore. And each time I meet Augie, I learn something new about her. So today she's accompanied by Everest, who is her piano teacher. And with that, I'd like to ask you to join me in welcoming our first person, Mrs. Augie Geva.
Where is my scarf? The scarf.
Oh, here it is, Augie.
Oh, yeah. Here we go. Thank you. How is this closing?
It closes so they don't see any pictures. They're just us.
But they will show the pictures?
No, they're done now. They've already shown them.
So no, I want the whole.
You can't because you have a light in your eye.
Okay. Good morning.
Augie, thank you so much for your willingness to join us today and be our first person. You have so much to tell us in a brief 1 hour period, so we'll get right into it. World War II began, of course, with Germany's invasion of Poland on September 1st, 1939. But before we turn to the war and the Holocaust, let's start with you sharing with us a little bit about your family, your community, and yourself in those years before the war began.
There was a real shock in 1936, and that was 3 years before the war really began, when my father was fired as Jews couldn't be in key positions anymore. And that was still really far away from the real anti-Semitism and the real problems that happened later. So he took it very, very badly. He got a heart attack. He hardly recovered from it. He couldn't work anymore. So my mother had to take over the responsibility of the family. So we had to move from our beautiful place, beautiful home where we grew up. And we went to Miskolc, it is 180 kilometers from Budapest. And she opened a small hotel there. It was very successful. That was the first time I heard about takeaway or food to go. That was a very good, we had a very good name. The hotel was important and many people came to visit. And she really managed, and my father just had to help a little bit, not too much. And he, instead of the 1 year that the doctors told those days he will stay alive, he stayed another 9 years after all these problems.
You told me that in those early pre-war days that you were very full of patriotism for Hungary. Will you say more about that?
We liked the country. I wouldn't say now our country. It was that day until they sent us away and until all the tragedies happened that we really didn't feel any more Hungarians. But I was really patriotic. I wrote poems. I was at every school celebration, actually talking a lot about Hungarians and the Hungarian ways. And I love the language. And it was a really, really big disappointment. Although the Hungarians were the last to be deported, we thought it will never get to us. And we always said, no, this will never happen in Hungary, but it happened.
As we noted earlier, the war began when Germany and Russia invaded Poland in September 1939. But for your community and for Jews in Hungary, the full effect of the war didn't really happen until the spring of 1944. Tell us about that period between the start of the war in September 1939 and before the Nazis came to to Hungary. What was that period, a lengthy period? What was that like for you and your family? What took place then?
We didn't feel anti-Semitism, actually, very much, we kids. I think it's also about our parents who were very protective, and they surely heard on the radio, and we had no access to the newspapers. We really didn't know it. And we had a very happy childhood, and it was very peaceful, actually, those days yet. And we were sent to the Protestant school, gymnasium. There was no Jewish gymnasium in Miskolc. And the percentage of the Jewish students was very low. For instance, we were 40 in my classroom, and we were only 2 Jewish girls. And we didn't feel actually all these, how shall I tell you, but other, but in Slovakia, they already felt, and in Romania and in Austria, it still didn't get to us. That's why my parents also thought that Hungary will never allow this to happen.
During that time, didn't some of your family members leave Hungary and emigrate elsewhere during that time?
They were, we called them those days pessimistic. They just tried to leave Hungary. So they don't want anything out of these rumors that are going on. They left for Palestine those days. It was still Palestine, my aunt and my uncle and the family. But they were the only ones who left. Really, all of us remained.
During that period, again, where the war really hadn't come to Hungary fully, you remember during that time, did you, let me rephrase that, did you know what was happening to Jews elsewhere in Europe? Do you think your family was aware of that?
Not exactly.
Not exactly.
Not exactly. And even, let's say, wouldn't have known that the word, my sister, Shosha, who was 13 and I was 14 at the time, wouldn't have known what the meaning deportation meant, what the word concentration camp meant. We heard it, we didn't register what it meant. So even if we heard about it, and always the slogan was, the Hungarians will never let it happen.
It won't happen here.
No, it won't.
And of course, all that changed in March of 1944, and March 19th is a very, very significant date for you.
On the 19th of March in the morning, my dad died. He was sick already, but hadn't he died and had heard what happened later on that day, that would have killed him anyhow. He died in the morning, and my mother called the relatives in Budapest. Everybody was living in Budapest from the family, and she called them to come to the funeral. And my aunt told, Uncle Nazi arrived. Nazi is a name, a Hungarian name like Moshe or like any other name. It wasn't connected with the Nazis, but my mother understood. And she got the second shock that day. She didn't even know how to tell it to us that something dramatic happened. And we went to the funeral, only my mother and my sister. Nobody could come. And when we came back from the funeral, every street corner, on every street corner was already a German soldier with guns. So it was a shock and a dramatic change from that day on in our lives.
It happened almost instantly, didn't it?
From one day to the other. The day before, we didn't even imagine.
Do you think your mother and other family members had any idea at that point what would happen next?
I don't think that anybody could even imagine what was happening next, but it was very gradual, and we gradually felt the impact, what it means to be an occupied country. That week, my mother sent us to a small village, to a friend's house for protection. She thought so, but we didn't feel protected. the lady of the house was desperate, hiding Jews. That's how she could have looked at it. She didn't let us out of the house. She didn't let us even to look at the windows. She was so frightened that, and we were so sad. It was our mourning, actually. We were grieving after my father. And we were wearing black. We couldn't sit Shiva as Jewish people sit after their loved ones. So everything was so changed. We just called my mom and told her we want to come home. We can't stay away. We want to be with her. And that was a real big problem because Jews couldn't leave the house at these days already without a yellow star on the jackets or clothes or whatever we were wearing. And it was a problem to leave the house without and to leave the house with. And there was a nurse who looked after my dad all the years, and she stayed with us after he died, and she volunteered to come to this village and bring us home by train. And we were all very worried how this train trip will work out. And when she came, we sat down, the three of us, to decide with a yellow star on our clothes or without. And we decided without. And when we were sitting in the train, the Hungarian gendarme, the German soldiers, they came and they looked at every person who was sitting in those trains. And they let people show their papers. They made people get off the train whose face they didn't like. And it was a trauma until we arrived to Miskolc. They looked at us, but somehow they didn't ask for papers, and we didn't look suspicious. Had we been caught without the yellow star on, it would have been Siberia, definitely. Or with the stars on and our papers they didn't like would have been the same. So that's why we decided to risk it without. So we got to our house safely, and it was, at least this period was over.
Is my memory correct that that happened on your birthday?
The next other thing happened.
Okay, in the middle of June. Tell us
Yes.
about what happened on your birthday, and then, of course, what happened once you were back in Miskolc.
Actually, after we got back to Miskolc, there were leaflets and there were notes on every walls what we are supposed to do. And one of them was we had to give our dogs to the municipality and our bicycle. It was somehow unheard of. The teenagers can't keep, Jewish teenagers can't keep a dog and can't have a bicycle. And when we gave them to the municipality, there was a note also that those who swore loyalty to Hungary will not be deported, and we will work in the fields. So we thought anything will do, not to be deported. By that time, we knew already what the word meant. So my mother found some 30, 35 very good friends who were ready to go to the municipality, swear loyalty to Hungary. Here my patriotism was already a little bit less. And we were taken to the fields, to a pusta. Pusta means farm, village. And we worked there from 5 in the morning till late at night. And that was the first time in my life when my feet were hurting. I never knew before what it meant.
And you're 14 years old.
And I was 14, my sister's 13. And we thought it's a hard life, but it's better than to be taken, to be deported. But one day the rule changed, the law changed, they changed their minds, the Hungarians, and they sent the gendarmes and the German soldiers to bring us back to the town. Now, when they brought us back on the way, there was an air raid. And that was on my birthday.
The air raid was on
the
your
air raid, we
birthday.
were supposed to lie flat and go into the trenches, whatever they could find them in the fields. And the air raid didn't touch us that time. Actually, it was for Miskolc and for Budapest, actually intended. And we stopped at a small village where we were all taken to the police station. The women were left outside, but the men were taken in for interrogation. And we just heard their screams. They were badly beaten. They wanted to find out from them where they hid their jewels, money, bank accounts, and so on. They were supposed to tell it all. And then we were taken, not back to our houses in Miskolc, we were taken to the ghetto. Now, what means ghetto is not well known, I suppose. Not all of you can even know the word. But it was a very, very popular place during the war. Mostly for those who were years in the ghetto, the Polish people. We were there only a few weeks. That meant part of the city, part of the town was fenced off. And we couldn't go over the fence, through the fence. We couldn't leave, we couldn't go shopping, we couldn't go out walking. We were supposed to stay in the houses. Now the houses meant a small 2-room apartment where there lived a couple, maybe with one child. And they brought us in 5, 6 families into this small apartment, this 1 bathroom, 1 kitchen, 1 bedroom. We were very uncomfortable, very stressed, very worried, very hungry, very thirsty, very everything. And we thought that's the worst part that ever could have happened to us, and we hope it will be over soon. We get over it. It wasn't the worst. We were taken out of the ghetto, taken to the brick factory.
To the brick factory.
The brick factory was, we were taken to that factory because it was on the railway station. Now, it had a roof. It had no sides. People could escape, actually. There were many guards, but still. And my mother was encouraged to do so, to take my sister and me and just walk out. She was afraid. She was afraid that she will lose one of us. She was afraid that we will be discovered and shot, and she was afraid. So she stayed, and she regretted it all her life. My good friend escaped, and we met her after the war, so it was possible to survive. We were waiting for trains, and we thought, okay, trains. So trains will be like the trains we knew, seated, looking out the window, having a sandwich. But when the trains came, it was a far cry from what we thought. They were cattle wagons. And we thought these cattle wagons just came by and will go, but they did not.
Augie, let me just ask you one question. Did you have any sense of where those trains, those cattle wagons, where they were to take you? Did you have any sense of that at that time?
No idea.
No idea.
Okay. We thought, we guessed that it will take us out of the country, but it was scary. And we didn't want to get on those cars, but they pushed us on, and the Germans and the gendarmes, Hungarian gendarmes, they helped us up. Actually, it was a very high stairs. And even the kettles usually had straw, at least. There was nothing on the floors. And they pushed in as many people as they could and closed the doors on us. So we would have been happy to be back in the ghetto, of course. It was worse that we saw there is nothing worse. There were very old people on in that certain wagon, boxcar. There were very young people, there were babies, there were pregnant women, there were teenagers. Everybody who was in that group, and everybody reacted differently. There were people who started to scream, couldn't stop screaming. There were hysterical kids. They just didn't know what's happening. How can this be possible? This is not human even. There were babies who couldn't stop crying, of course. There were women, pregnant women who fainted, and There was nowhere to faint to be. We couldn't even sit down, and the train started to move. And there was a very small window, very small one under the roof. And that gave us a little bit of indication when it is night and when it is day. And we didn't know how many days we were in these horrible conditions on these wagons. It took 3 days. They told us later, wouldn't have calculated it even. No, when the doors opened and we had to get off these wagons, they immediately separated the men from the women. This was one of the worst scenes I can really imagine, when wives were clinging to husbands, brothers to mothers, sisters to brothers. It was impossible to describe what it meant to be separated from one another. There was nothing to do about it. We were at gunpoint all the time. And then the women started to move at a certain space to a certain point. And this time my mother really got already, worried is not even the word. She regretted, of course, that she didn't escape. She regretted that she got us to that point. And she told us to walk slowly, to stay with the crowd. We were 5 in a row. And she will go to the front and see what's happening in the front, to know to decide what to do. She got to the front and saw what was happening. And slowly, she came back. She wasn't noticed. She wasn't shot. She could get back to us and tell us the following. Don't ever call me mom or sister. Families shouldn't be together. That's what she saw there. That the minute somebody told, please let me stay with my mom, let me stay with my daughter, they were immediately separated drastically. One went to the left side and the other was sent to the right side. My mother didn't know that time what the other side meant. This we found out much later. But she saw that we are not supposed to be young. We are not supposed to be 13 and 14, because 13 and 14 years old were sent immediately to the left side. So she told us to put on our scarves we brought with us and bind it in a certain way that it should make us older, and we should say that we are 18 and 19, and under no conditions to say that we are less. And she thought that the way we are binding our scarves will make us look older. And it makes me look older even now. Then she bound her scarf in a different way that should make her look younger. And it was that way. And it might have. Something helped. Something helped.
One of the things that we'll learn from you today, but you can't even begin to tell us adequately, is how extraordinary your mother was. And to be able to size that up and adjust like that was remarkable. And there are other incidents like that. You told me about a friend of yours, your best friend, Edith. Will you say just a little bit about that?
We were 2 Jewish girls in the classroom, and Edith was my best friend and the other Jewish girl. And her mother was sent to the left immediately at this point when my mother found out what to do in order to stay together. And this time she didn't even think that it should be, what side it should be, but we should stay together. And this Bishop Herzig accompanied us all the way. Now, the next day in Auschwitz, I will come back to the selection, but the next day there came trucks with loudspeakers telling every girl under 16 should come to the trucks. You will have better treatments, better sleeping quarters, better food. And a lot of girls started to run to these trucks, also Sosha and me, my sister. And my mother caught us and told, no way. It doesn't matter that you will have better treatment, better food, better whatever, you stay with me. You stay with me. And Edith, you don't go anywhere, you stay with the family, and I will look after you as I looked after my own daughters. But Edith didn't want to listen to her. She said, if I go, I might meet my mom. Maybe this car goes somewhere where my mom is staying, and she didn't listen to us. And I don't have to tell you that we never saw her anymore, and we found out later what happened to her. I just want to go back for a minute, our arrival to Auschwitz, when I always told you that there is nothing worse, so the worst was just to come. We were led to a big hall, and we were supposed to put down our bags. Now, what were the bags? We had a small bag, but we were told to take with us when we went to the farm for the work, that we can put in it only what we can carry ourselves. So it shouldn't be too heavy, it shouldn't be too big. So I put in it a new watch. I did, oh my gosh. A book I was recently reading, a dress, kid stuff, teenager stuff. I don't know what my sister had with her. So when we had to give our bags, it was not so tragical, but it meant a lot to us because it was our last or only connection with the home yet, still. So we put it down in a corner. But the grown-ups, they had in these bags jewels, family pictures, documents, very important stuff. And they got really hysterical, scared. They were begging the guards, they were crying, they were doing whatever they could. We had to give it. Gunpoint, we had to put it down. So it was very hard, that act. But the next one was worse. We had to undress. We had to undress and give everything we had on to put in another corner, shoes, everything. And this time, it turned out that all the grown-ups thought of the bags that were taken away from them, but they remembered that there is another way. So they sewed in their clothes. I'm afraid to touch to show how and where. In the pockets, in the linings, in the dresses, the money, the pictures, the documents, things that she sought to buy freedom with, food with. We had to take off these dresses. Everything we had to take off. So my mother and her friends had really nothing left. Their last hope was gone to be able to buy some better life or freedom. And we were standing there without clothes, as if this wasn't enough. They came to shave us from all hair on our body. It was the most humiliating thing I have ever had. Later came other ones, but that was that time. And we were led to the showers. Not at that time, we couldn't find out what it meant to be in the showers. And we were so lucky that water came from the showers. Because on the other side, as we called it, on the left side where people were sent, gas came from the showers. And this we didn't know, luckily. And when my mother found out, she was very careful that my sister and I shouldn't know about it. We should never find out about it. She didn't want to spoil our security in a way and to make us panicky and to, we never found out actually. Till the liberation, we really didn't know. She knew everything. And how, by knowing it, she could shield us from all this tragedy. So that was actually the first day, and then we were sent to the barracks where we got 2 blankets and a plate. And I remember a spoon. My sister says, no, we had no spoon. Everybody remembers other stuff. But everything was gray. That's what I remember so very well. Everything was gray. The blankets, the barracks, the plates, the bowls, the air, the smoke that we didn't know where it came from, and we didn't know why it was gray and what it meant. And in the barracks, we had these bunks and good. So my mother told, wonderful, okay, that's what we have. I sleep in the middle, my sister on top, and I was in the lower one. And we thought that's how it will be, but no. they put another 6, 7 people on the same banks. And if somebody turned, all the 6 people had to turn, and so on. So I'm not going to get into more details of this time.
And there's so much more you could say, but I know you want to tell us what happened after that. You were sent to Plaszow from there
Yes.
to very hard labor. Tell us about that.
We were a few days in Auschwitz, maybe it might be a few weeks, 2 weeks, I think. We thought that we are in the worst of the worst of the worst part. But then we were sent back to the railway stations, back into the wagons, and the wagons took us for a 1-day trip, and we were sent to Plaszow. Now, Plaszow is the place where the Schindler's List was taken, and Plaszow was a place where the inmates were criminals, not like us, who came from the cities and from the other countries.
And these were murderers and
murderers, and we were so scared from the morning till the evening. We were just looking behind us, who is behind us. We were very, very scared. And the work was not only hard, it was senseless. It was absolutely humiliating. To take a big rock, it was a quarry, Plaszow. We had to take a big rock up the hill, and next day we had to bring it back down. Now, somebody didn't choose a rock big enough, like my sister who was 13, and she really, how big a rock she could carry. So she chose a smaller one, and she was very, very badly beaten. And of course, we couldn't help her because we were not allowed to say mother, sister. We never spoke about the relationship. Nobody knew that we are family, among the guards and the couples. So this took also quite a while, and we were very weakened and very desperate when we heard shellings, cannon shots.
shelling. Mm-hmm.
And then we were a little bit happier. We thought that maybe the Russians are nearing and liberating us. But the Germans heard it too, of course, and they knew what's happening. They liquidated the camp. So they took us back to the wagons, to the station. So we were again in the wagons and traveling somewhere we had no idea where to. And my sister and me and I were crying the whole time. Now this time we couldn't stop anymore. So my mother kept on telling that you were in the worst place. You were in Auschwitz. And the worst place, we were in Plaszow. There is no worse place than these 2 places. So don't worry. We tried not to worry. But when the doors opened and we saw where we were taken, it was the end. It was Auschwitz.
So they took you back to Auschwitz.
Took us back to Auschwitz. And then my mother really, there was nothing more she could say except telling us that now there will be the selections, and there was one officer selecting. And the one officer who was selecting was Mengele. I can't even say the doctor, it doesn't come to him. He was the worst, the cruelest person ever. He was called the death of angel, the angel of death.
Angel of death, angel of death.
And my mother really got scared. She told, look, 2 things. Either you follow me wherever he sends me, or you say you want to work, you want to be in a working camp. Germans need workers, so this might save you. So she said she's going first, and my sister after her, and I should be the last because I really looked very weak and bad. So she was sent to the right side immediately. My sister behind her, also to the right side. And I came in front of him, he told me left side. I told him, no, I would like to go there. But why is
This was to Mengele.
Mengele? And Mengele was alone deciding, but there were lots of soldiers with guns around him, surrounding him. So the guns were pointed at me when I told no. He told, why, what is there? I told him, that's a working camp. He says, you don't look to me that you can still work. And then he realized that we were talking German. And this is the point I want to tell you, that my father knew that something is going to happen. He knew something very bad will come. And he called my sister and I one day and told us that you have to know something that can't be taken away from you. And this will be languages. And this will give you power. And the knowledge will give you power. And she saw to it that we knew fluently German and English by the age of 14. So if hadn't I known German that day, I really wouldn't be sitting here today. So Mengele asked me, how do you know German that well? And then it didn't matter anymore that he told me, okay, go where you want to go. It was unbelievable. My mother fainted when she saw the conversation. She was sure she will never, ever see me again. She didn't even know that I was sent to her, to that side, because she was still fainted when I got there.
Agi, you told me that when you've shared this with audiences in the past, people will often ask you, well, weren't you scared of Mengele to talk that way to him?
Yes.
Tell the audience what you told me.
I told no, I was afraid of my mother. She told me to do this, and we had such strict discipline, my sister and I. We realized that really we are in her hands, and we'll do whatever she says. So, but then another humiliation, of course. Why not? We were tattooed like cattle, just like that. They put a number on our arms. It was hurting, I wouldn't say, but it was more hurting the knowledge that we are not. They kept on telling us, you have no names from today. You are just numbers. It was humiliating. It was very hurtful.
And you would continue at Auschwitz for a while longer until late 1944. And then you were sent for the last time from Auschwitz to do more slave labor. Tell us where you were taken, and you were still together at this time. Where did you go from Auschwitz? And tell us about that.
There were selections every day. Germany needed workers in factories. So sometimes they looked at strong feet, at strong hands, but sometimes they looked at eyes. And I wore glasses from the age of 5. So my mom used to take off my glasses, folded them and put them sideways in her shoe, that I shouldn't look different. And somehow during these elections, we stayed together again. And we were sent to the railway station and sent out of Auschwitz. This time, we hoped we will never come back to Germany.
That's where you went to Rochlitz?
And then we went to Rochlitz. Rochlitz is a small town near Leipzig. And we were studying there how to make aeroplane spare parts, small screws. And then they gave me a pencil and a paper and a table and a chair. And I couldn't believe that was the first time I saw a table, and that's the first time I sat on a chair since we were deported. And they give me the pencil. I was happier with it than with a piece of bread. It made me feel, in spite of my number, that I'm just a number, it made me feel human and responsible again. That was in Rochlitz.
But that didn't last long either.
No.
So where were you then taken?
We were taken to Calw near Stuttgart, to a big factory where the real screws were done, not studying anymore. Now, if I always told you that was the worst, and that was the worst, and that was the worst, I can't imagine how can be something worse to stay 12 hours on your feet at night, listening to the monotone noise of these machines and stay awake. How could we stay awake 12 hours at night making these small screws? We couldn't. Until one girl fell asleep, really, and fell into the machine, and she was badly hurt. She stayed alive. And it was a wake-up call for all of us. So we stayed awake, but it was a struggle that I can't describe.
And while you were at Calw, your remarkable mother, if I understand correctly, began engaging in little acts of sabotage.
Yes. It happened by chance, the first part of it. I was making the screws from a plan they drew for me from a small piece of aluminum column. And my sister was at the controls where they were controlling these screws so that they are too big, too small, or just right. And my mother was at the big filing stone, filing down the screws in case they were a little bit bigger than acceptable. And once somehow the stone exploded and she got so scared that she fainted. And they called her to the headquarters, the commandant, who explained to her that these stones are very, very delicate and you can't press these screws harder because then they explode, and that is a big problem. You can't find a new one. You have to order one, and orders were not so easily coming by. And until the stone comes, all the screws were in the crates near the doors waiting to be sent out. Oh, she thought that might be a good idea, that she can maybe help a little bit to end the war. So she kept doing this. Every now and then, she pushed the screw harder to the stone. Stone exploded, mother fainted. And we never found out.
I was going to say, did you know she was doing that?
No, we never found out. She was afraid. She didn't trust anybody. She did it, but didn't trust anybody, and we found out only much later after the liberation.
And Augie, finally in February 1945, you're taken out of Cal, but this time you're sent on a forced march, which really was a death march. Tell us about that and what you thought was going to happen and where you went.
Can you imagine something worse than traveling in these wagons? They couldn't find anything worse. It was the worst of the worst to travel in these wagons with no place, no space, I can't even tell you with no what. But this was worse. They told us to get ready, we are going. We understood that the Allies might be nearing, but we couldn't have imagined where we were going and how we were going. So we were standing at the door in lines all the time with the Germans. There was a Zählappell, they called it. They kept on counting us in Auschwitz also. That was the most occupational therapy, let's say, for them.
Line up for hours.
Line up for hours. And here they lined us up near the door, and we were waiting for a carriage, for a car, for a coach, for something. They told go. We told where? There's nothing. So, what do you mean nothing? You walk, you go. We wanted back the wagons. Imagine we wished back for the wagons. We just had to leave in this cold night in Germany, windy, cold. We had nothing on. I didn't mention that the first day when we had to undress and had to shower and we were shaved. I didn't mention two things. One was that we were sprayed also. More humility you can't be than to be sprayed. And after the spraying, we had to go to another corner and choose clothes. What is clothes? One dress and one shoe. No stockings, no underwear. So that's what we had on. So I ran back and took my blanket.
This is the dead of winter, and an especially
the middle of winter,
an especially brutal winter, as it turned out.
And we walked step by step in those very bad shoes that didn't fit and were worn out already. And we were so cold, and the wind was so strong. And we told, you mean it really to walk? We wished the wagons back. So we walked for 400 kilometers. Every night. And when morning came, they were afraid that the villagers would see us. So they found us barns. And we were supposed to sit in the barns. Who could sleep, could sleep. And we had no food, of course. So we were looking for something. I remember we found raw cabbage, raw potatoes, the potato peels, hardly any water. So we were weak even, not only cold, We were very weak, and of course we couldn't sleep, so we were sleepy. And we were walking, when the evening came and we were sent out of these barns, we were sleeping, walking. So this was a period that I really can say that it was the worst. And then they kept us telling, go quicker. If you want to go by trains, you want the wagons, okay? Go quicker, we are going to a railway station, you will get wagons. There were another two girls who understood German. And the news came back to everybody, word by word, that we are not going to go by wagons. The wagons, the trains are bringing the guns to execute us and the order to do so. I couldn't walk any more quicker than I was walking. I couldn't walk even anymore. And there came a point when I just sat down and told, no, I can't. I just can't. And then I remembered hearing that there were death marches. Why were they called death marches? Because many people, many prisoners who couldn't walk anymore, and really couldn't walk anymore, sat down at the side or fell down to the side of the road, they were shot. We were 199 women. One woman died from typhus in Calv. Nobody else got it, at least. So we were still 199. We just kept on walking. And when we heard what's going to happen, part of us believed it, some didn't believe it, and I didn't care. I really didn't care whether I will be shot or whether I will just die like that. I just couldn't walk anymore. I couldn't stop crying.
At that point, was your mother still able to encourage you to keep going?
Yes, she kept us telling also when we were still in the factory, she kept us not being happy, being normal, by telling us stories all the time, stories about what was and stories what she thinks will be. She always told us what we ate when we were still at home, what means home. And then she told it will come back and we are going to have all this back. I never believed that I will ever be liberated. I personally really didn't believe it. And then she kept us going. She told us so many encouraging ideas she had while we were walking, until she heard where we were walking to, that we might be executed. So she just couldn't encourage us to go anymore. But we had to. We were again at gunpoint. Remember, we had all the time guards around us with guns. And when we arrived to the railway station, it turned out that the trains were gone with the guns. The order was there to execute us, but they had no guns. This we found out much later. And the officers we saw got some white envelopes from the station master. We found out later that it were false papers to go over to Switzerland. And the soldiers who were just guarding us, they sent us back to the forest. They told us, they didn't tell us that there are no guns to execute you, of course, but they told us, you missed the train, you have to keep on walking. I think that was the most desperate day during the whole year of my life. That was the worst of the worst, to go back into the forest, into the cold. There were creeks we had to cross, and these shoes were not shoes anymore. My foot was bleeding. That was the worst day. I just sat down, I told no more, never more. But of course we had to, and my mother kept on. I don't know what else she could tell me to keep me going, but I did. And when we got back to the forest, after a while, somehow, after some walking, one of the Lagerälteste, she was the capo. In German, that means the capo, the leader. There were 20 Polish people with us, 179 Hungarians. And the Polish people were the ones between the Germans and us. They were translating, and they got the clothes first, and then they divided us. They got the food, and they divided us to us. And one of them, the older one, she told, listen to me, stop walking. And then she told with these words, from now on, the 28th of April, 1945, you are, and she had no heart to tell the word free. And until we realized what she told. We looked around, there were no guards around us. There was no one guarding us.
They had all just evaporated.
We just disappeared.
Just disappeared.
And she told us we are free. So this desperate, worst day of my life became the best. I was so happy. I didn't actually know what to do. My sister didn't care. She just sat down, opened her bag, took out all the food there was in it, because we got it, got for a few days, always reserves, but we were not allowed to touch it. She sat down and started to eat. She didn't care until somebody warned my mother. She remembered that after hunger and starving, it's the worst thing you can do to start eating. Many people really died from this act. So they stopped her, and then what? We are free. So what? What to do? We are in Germany. It's winter. It's cold. We have nothing. So then.
And the war's not over.
And the war is not over. Exactly. And we were 179 Hungarians with 179 opinions. Everybody had a different idea. One told stay put, the other told left, the third told east, one told wait for the daylight. Everybody had some other idea. My mother gathered some 30 people around her, and they discussed what to do. And these 30-something people agreed what to do. And we started out in a certain direction. We didn't wait a minute in the forest.
Agi, we were close to the end of our time. I know you're getting
It's
there. Tell
dead.
us about encountering the U.S. soldiers.
Yes.
Okay.
So we were walking, and then we were scared by hearing voices. We told, oh my God, we are getting back into German hands. But this might be Russians, might be anyone else, might be any soldiers. And then we were supposed to be a little bit brave and started to walk wherever we heard the voices. And then we heard English speaking voices. So the group said, you know English, you go and talk to them. Okay, I was 14. No, I was 15 already. So we found a stick and we bound on it some underwear. I don't know where they found it. It was supposed to be white, but it wasn't. And the soldiers stopped. And I told them who we are, where we come from. And they told us, we have never in our lives ever seen a bunch of women so dirty, so desperate, so everything. So where were you? What to do with you? So they told, okay, we are taking you to our headquarters. Their headquarters was in Planze, in a hotel. And they were very nice to us, very, very nice to us. They found doctors and nurses, and they looked after us, and they treated us, and they were just looking after us. And that was actually the liberation. And I never, ever could find these soldiers. I
tried.
I told here in the museum, I told them the date, the day, the hour, everything I knew about it, and we couldn't find them until today. They must be 95 by now. I was 15 then,
Right.
and we couldn't find them. And
Agi, in the very little time we have left, there's so many more things that I would love to hear you talk about, and I wish we had time for our audience to ask you some questions. But one of the comments that you said to me is that you just can't bring yourself to describe it as bad as it really was. That in a way, you're not telling how horrible it really was by what you've told us. Can you say a little bit about that?
as you surely noticed, it's hard for me to talk about all that was. I made it my mission to tell it to anybody who is interested, and everybody should know what happened and how it happened. But it wouldn't be possible for me to continue this mission if I would tell exactly how it was. It was much, much worse. When I told you it was the worst, that was the worst for that minute. But it was much, much worse. And many, many things like we couldn't even mention the
Electric fences.
electric fences and a lot of things we couldn't mention. I can sleep and I can be calm as long as I don't have to talk about the worst of the worst, what really, really happened. As much as my mother was shielding us and taking care of us that we shouldn't know exactly everything, I can talk about what I spoke today. That way, at least that way, everybody will know and imagine what there was, but it was much worse.
We're going to close the program in just a moment, and I will turn back to Augie to close our program. Among the many things, of course, that Augie doesn't have time to share with us, not only details and much more from what happened to this point, but then what happened going forward. Augie would live for a while under the communists in Hungary, and many, many traumas associated with that. And then you and your sister would make it to Israel, but your mother was not able to until that way you told me that was your first real separation from your mother. So I wish we could keep you all afternoon. We can't, but we want to thank you for being with us. Remind you we'll have a first-person program every Wednesday and Thursday until the middle of August. So hope that you'll.
Not with me. Not with me.
I also, it's our tradition at First Person that our first person gets the last word. So I'm going to turn back to Augie to close the program. When she's done, Augie is going to get up immediately and go up the stairs here. So if you make sure she can do that and go to the back door, she's going to sign copies of Echoes of Memory for anybody who would like one. But before Augie does that, she would like to share with you when she's back there, if you want to, as you go by her tattoo. You can't really see it from the stage here, so Augie will be at the door when she finishes. So again, thank you for being with us, and on that note, let me turn back to Augie to close our program.
Thank you for listening. It really, lipstick.
I was so wanting to.
I tell it very quickly. I tell it very quickly. Those soldiers, what they told us, the American soldiers who liberated us, we are going shopping and everybody can tell, everybody can ask for something among the 30 women who were there. So some people asked the schnitzel, some people asked for a sweater, some people asked for something they dreamt of the whole year. Okay, chocolate. I asked for a lipstick. Because when I looked in the mirror, I was so ugly. I was bald. I had no hair. I was pale. I was dirty. So I thought lipstick might help.
Thank you.
I wanted to tell you really, if you have teenagers here, mostly, how very, very important it is, the discipline. It's hard for me to tell it because it's a word you surely hear daily by teachers, from teachers and from parents. But hadn't my sister and I listened when my mother told some things, just now don't turn, now yes turn, now bend, now go here, now don't talk, we wouldn't be here today. She knew, she saw what's happening. Respect, very important. And something else is very, very important, languages, knowledge. It's power, it's unbelievable power to know languages and be able to get around with it. And the last thing is how this museum really was my, almost could say second home, with so much help, with so much consideration, with so much understanding. It really means a lot to me. And you have all the information here from ancestors till war crimes, everything you want to know, you have all this information in this museum, whom I'm very grateful. Thank you. That's it. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.